morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace, as Queen Camilla prepared for what should have been one of the most important days of her reign. The state opening of Parliament was just hours away, and every detail had been planned with military precision. She stood before her ornate mirror in the Queen's private chambers, watching as her personal dresser carefully arranged the folds of her ceremonial robes. "Your Majesty, the imperial state crown is ready," announced Lady Margaret Thornfield, the Queen's most trusted lady-in-waiting. The ancient crown sat majestically on its velvet cushion, its 2,868 diamonds catching the morning light and throwing rainbow patterns across the silk-lined walls. Queen Camilla nodded gracefully, her mind focused on the speech she would deliver to both houses of Parliament. This particular ceremony held special significance. It would mark her first solo state opening since King Charles had fallen ill 3 months earlier. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than any crown she had ever worn. Captain James Morrison of the Queen's Guard stood at attention outside the chamber door. At 35, he was the youngest captain in the regiment's history, having earned his position through exceptional service in Afghanistan and later as a protection officer for the royal family. His sharp blue eyes constantly scanned the corridors, alert to any potential threat. Morrison had served the royal family for 8 years, but today something felt different. There was an unusual tension in the air that he couldn't quite identify. As the morning progressed, palace staff moved with practiced efficiency through their final preparations. The Queen's motorcade was being inspected for the 3rd time, security protocols were being reviewed, and every guest's credentials were being verified once again. In the kitchen, chefs put finishing touches on the reception menu, while florists made last-minute adjustments to the elaborate arrangements that would grace Westminster Palace. Morrison received his final briefing from Colonel Sir David Hartwell, the commanding officer of the Household Division. "Captain, today's security is paramount. We've received some unusual intelligence chatter, nothing specific, but I want you personally overseeing the Crown Jewels escort detail." "Understood, sir," Morrison replied, though something in the colonel's tone suggested there was more to the story than he was being told. He had learned to trust his instincts during his military service, and those same instincts were now telling him to remain extra vigilant. Meanwhile, in a small office tucked away in the basement of the palace, Dr. Elizabeth Hartley worked frantically at her computer. As the royal family's chief historian and genealogist, she had been researching the provenance of several crown jewels for a planned exhibition. What she had discovered 3 days ago had kept her awake every night since. Her hands trembled slightly as she printed out another document, adding it to the growing pile of evidence on her desk. The research had started innocently enough. While cataloging historical documents for the exhibition, she had stumbled across a sealed envelope in the royal archives. The envelope, marked with the personal seal of King George VI, contained documents that had apparently been overlooked for decades. As she read through the yellowed papers, her excitement had quickly turned to shock, then to horror. The documents revealed a secret that had been buried for over 80 years, a secret that could shake the very foundations of the monarchy, but more importantly, they revealed that one particular item in the crown jewels collection, the very crown Queen Camilla was about to wear, was not what everyone believed it to be. Dr. Hartley had spent the last 3 days verifying her findings, cross-referencing historical records, consulting with experts at the British Museum, and even having discreet conversations with retired palace officials who might remember details from decades past. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same shocking conclusion. She had tried to arrange a meeting with the Queen's private secretary, but had been told that Her Majesty was too busy with preparations for the state opening. She had attempted to contact the crown jeweler, but he was traveling abroad on royal business. With time running out, she had finally made a desperate decision that morning. She would have to break protocol and approach someone in the Queen's Guard directly. Back in the Queen's chambers, the final preparations were underway. Queen Camilla had been dressed in her ceremonial robes, and now came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the placing of the imperial state crown upon her head. The room fell silent as Lady Margaret approached with the crown. "It's magnificent, isn't it?" the Queen said softly, admiring the ancient piece of regalia. "To think of all the monarchs who have worn this crown, all the history it represents." "Indeed, Your Majesty," Lady Margaret replied, though her voice carried a note of formality that seemed slightly strained. She too had been feeling the unusual tension that seemed to permeate the palace that morning. As the crown was lifted toward the Queen's head, Captain Morrison entered the room for his final security check. His trained eyes automatically scanned every corner, every person, every potential threat. But as his gaze fell upon the imperial state crown, something made him pause. There was something about one of the jewels that seemed wrong somehow. At that exact moment, Dr. Hartley appeared in the doorway, her face flushed from running through the palace corridors. She carried a leather portfolio clutched tightly against her chest, and her usual composed demeanor had been replaced by barely contained urgency. "Your Majesty," she gasped, trying to catch her breath while maintaining the proper respectful tone. "I must speak with you immediately. It's about the crown." The room fell into stunned silence. Lady Margaret's hands froze with the crown still hovering above the Queen's head. Captain Morrison's hand instinctively moved toward his radio, though he wasn't sure why. Queen Camilla herself looked up with a mixture of confusion and concern. "Dr. Hartley," the Queen said carefully, "surely whatever historical question you have can wait until after the ceremony." "I'm afraid not, Your Majesty," Dr. Hartley replied, her voice growing stronger despite her obvious nervousness. "What I've discovered, it changes everything we thought we knew about the imperial state crown, and if I'm right, you cannot wear it today." The tension in the room was now palpable. Captain Morrison found himself in an impossible position, caught between his duty to protect the Queen and his growing sense that Dr. Hartley's urgent manner suggested a genuine threat of some kind. His years of training had taught him to expect danger from external sources, but never from within the palace walls themselves, and certainly not from a respected member of the royal household. As all eyes turned toward the crown that had sat atop the heads of British monarchs for generations, nobody could have predicted that the next few minutes would unravel a secret that had been hidden for nearly a century, or that Captain Morrison would soon find himself making a decision that would change the course of royal history forever. Dr. Hartley stepped forward, her portfolio trembling in her hands as she faced the most powerful woman in Britain. The weight of her discovery pressed down upon her shoulders like a physical force. She had spent years studying royal history, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. "Your Majesty, 3 days ago I discovered documents in the royal archives that have been sealed since 1943, she began, her voice gaining confidence as she spoke. They were hidden in King George VI's private papers, marked with instructions that they should only be opened in case of extreme emergency. Queen Camilla remained perfectly still, though her eyes showed a flicker of concern. "And you believed this constituted such an emergency? When you see what's in these documents, Your Majesty, I believe you'll agree." Dr. Hartley opened her portfolio and withdrew a yellowed envelope bearing the royal seal. "These papers detail a secret operation during World War II, one that involved the crown jewels themselves." Captain Morrison found himself drawn into the conversation despite his better judgment. Protocol dictated that he should escort Dr. Hartley from the room immediately, but something in her manner convinced him that she was not simply a historian who had gotten carried away with her research. Lady Margaret, still holding the imperial state crown, looked uncertainly between the Queen and Dr. Hartley. The crown seemed heavier in her hands now, as if the weight of whatever secret Dr. Hartley was about to reveal was somehow transferring itself to the ancient regalia. "Continue," Queen Camilla said quietly, though her tone suggested she was far from pleased with this unprecedented interruption. Dr. Hartley carefully extracted a document from the envelope. In September 1940, as the Blitz began and invasion seemed imminent, King George VI made a decision that was kept secret from everyone except a handful of trusted advisors. He ordered that the crown jewels be moved from the Tower of London to a secure location. "That's hardly shocking news," Lady Margaret interjected. "Everyone knows the crown jewels were moved during the war for safekeeping." "Yes, but what people don't know is that the king also ordered exact replicas to be made," Dr. Hartley continued, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper. "The replicas were so perfect that they were indistinguishable from the originals except by the most expert examination. The plan was that if the Germans invaded and somehow discovered the crown jewels' hiding place, they would find only copies." Queen Camilla's expression shifted from annoyance to genuine interest. "And, according to these documents, the operation was successful." The real crown jewels were hidden in a location so secret that only 3 people knew where they were. But here's where it becomes complicated. King George VI died suddenly in 1952, and 2 of the 3 people who knew the location had already passed away during the war. Captain Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. As a former soldier, he understood the implications of what Dr. Hartley was suggesting. Military operations during wartime often involve secrets that died with the people who created them. Dr. Hartley pulled out another document, this one bearing multiple official seals and signatures. This is a memo dated February 15, 1952, just 9 days before the king's death. In it, he writes that he intended to reveal the location of the real crown jewels to Queen Elizabeth II during her coronation preparations, but his death prevented this from happening. The room fell silent except for the steady ticking of an antique clock on the mantelpiece. Queen Camila sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, processing what she was hearing. "What you're suggesting," the Queen said slowly, "is that the crown jewels we've been using for the past 70 years are replicas?" "Not all of them, Your Majesty. According to the documents, only certain pieces were replaced. The imperial state crown was one of them, along with St. Edward's crown and several other significant pieces. The replicas were created by master craftsmen using real gems, but the historical pieces themselves, the actual crowns worn by centuries of monarchs, remain hidden somewhere." Captain Morrison stepped forward. "Dr. Hartley, these are extraordinary claims. What proof do you have beyond these documents?" Dr. Hartley reached into her portfolio once more and withdrew a series of photographs. "I had these taken by a specialist photographer at the British Museum. They show microscopic engravings on the inside of the imperial state crown, markings that would only be visible under extreme magnification." She handed the photographs to Queen Camilla, who studied them intently. Lady Margaret moved closer, still holding the crown, and peered over the Queen's shoulder. "These markings," Dr. Hartley explained, "appear to be the signature of Thomas Hartwell, a master goldsmith who worked exclusively on replica pieces during the war. His signature was so subtle that it would never be noticed during normal use, but it was his way of marking his work for historical records." Queen Camilla looked up from the photographs, her expression unreadable. "And you believe these markings are present on the crown Lady Margaret is currently holding?" "I believe they are, Your Majesty, but there's more." Dr. Hartley's voice grew even more serious. "According to the final document in King George VI's papers, he left specific instructions about what should be done if this secret were ever discovered. He wrote that the replica crown should never be worn in any official ceremony once the truth was known, as it would constitute a deception of the British people. The implications hung heavy in the air. If Dr. Hartley was correct, then Queen Camilla was about to wear a replica crown to one of the most important ceremonies of the British parliamentary year. The symbolic weight of the monarchy itself seemed to rest upon the authenticity of the crown jewels. Captain Morrison found himself facing an impossible decision. His duty was to protect the Queen, but what did protection mean in a situation like this? Should he protect her from potential embarrassment by dismissing Dr. Hartley's claims? Or should he protect her from unknowingly participating in what King George VI himself had called a deception? "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "perhaps we should postpone the ceremony until these claims can be properly investigated." Queen Camilla's eyes flashed. "Captain Morrison, are you seriously suggesting that I cancel the state opening of Parliament based on unverified historical documents and photographs of microscopic engravings? I'm suggesting, Your Majesty, that we take time to verify the truth before proceeding." Lady Margaret, who had been listening in stunned silence, suddenly spoke up. "Your Majesty, if I may, I've noticed something odd about this crown before, but I never mentioned it because I assumed I was mistaken." All eyes turned to her. "What did you notice?" Queen Camilla asked. "The weight, Your Majesty. I've handled this crown dozens of times over the years, and recently it seems lighter somehow. Not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. If what Dr. Hartley is suggesting is true, if this is a replica made with different materials or construction techniques, that might explain the difference." Dr. Hartley nodded eagerly. The documents mention that the replicas were made to be slightly lighter for practical reasons, using a different internal framework while maintaining the exact external appearance. Queen Camilla stood up abruptly, her ceremonial robes rustling around her. She walked to the window and gazed out at the crowds already gathering along the processional route to Westminster. Thousands of people were waiting to see their queen, and millions more would watch on television around the world. "Dr. Hartley," she said without turning around, "if your theory is correct, where are the real crown jewels now?" "That's the most troubling part, Your Majesty. According to the documents, only one person would know, whoever King George VI entrusted with the final secret. And that person's identity is revealed in the last document, which I haven't shown you yet." The Queen turned back to face the room, her expression grave. "Show me." Dr. Hartley's hand shook as she reached for the final document in her portfolio. This was the piece of evidence that had kept her awake for 3 nights, the revelation that changed everything they thought they knew about the past 70 years of British royal history. "Your Majesty, this document is dated February 20th, 1952, just 4 days before King George VI's death. It appears to be his final written instruction regarding the crown jewels." She handed the paper to Queen Camilla with trembling fingers. The Queen read silently, her face growing pale as she processed the words. Captain Morrison watched her expression change from skepticism to shock, then to something approaching disbelief. When she finished reading, she sat down heavily in her chair. "This cannot be accurate," she whispered. Lady Margaret moved closer. "Your Majesty, what does it say?" Queen Camilla looked up, her eyes meeting Captain Morrison's. "According to this document, King George VI entrusted the location of the real crown jewels to Colonel Sir William Morrison of the Scots Guards, with instructions that the secret should be passed down through his family until such time as it could be safely revealed." Captain Morrison felt the blood drain from his face. "Morrison? Your Majesty, that was my grandfather's name. My grandfather was Colonel Sir William Morrison." The room fell into stunned silence. Dr. Hartley stared at Captain Morrison with wide eyes. "You're his grandson?" "Yes, but he never told me anything about any crown jewels. He died when I was 12 years old. If he knew something, he took it to his grave." Queen Camilla stood up again, beginning to pace the length of the room. "This is impossible. We're talking about a conspiracy that would have required dozens of people to maintain absolute silence for over 70 years. Actually, Your Majesty, according to the documents, very few people would have needed to know," Dr. Hartley explained. "The craftsmen who made the replicas believed they were creating backup pieces for safekeeping. The officials who moved the crown jewels back to the tower after the war believed they were moving the originals. Only King George VI and Colonel Morrison knew the complete truth." Captain Morrison's mind raced back through his childhood memories. His grandfather had been a reserved man, dignified and proper in the way that career military officers often were. He had served with distinction in both world wars and had been deeply devoted to the royal family. But he had never spoken about his wartime service in any detail. "Wait," Morrison said suddenly. "There was something. My grandfather had a safety deposit box at Coutts Bank. When he died, my father inherited it, and when my father died 5 years ago, it passed to me. But I've never opened it. The bank said it contained only personal papers, and I never felt ready to go through his private things." Queen Camilla stopped pacing and turned to face him. "Captain Morrison, I think it's time you opened that box. Your Majesty, even if my grandfather did know something, we're still faced with an immediate problem. The state opening is scheduled to begin in less than 2 hours. Hundreds of dignitaries are already arriving at Westminster Palace." Dr. Hartley stepped forward. "Your Majesty, there might be a way to verify the authenticity of this crown right now, without opening any safety deposit boxes." "How?" "The documents mention that Thomas Hartwell, the craftsman who made the replicas, included not just his signature but also a date code inside each piece. If we could examine the inside of the crown with a magnifying glass, we should be able to see if there's a date from 1940 or 1941. Lady Margaret looked down at the crown in her hands. "I couldn't possibly. The crown is far too valuable to be examined by anyone except the official crown jeweler." "But the crown jeweler isn't here," Queen Camilla pointed out. "He's in Switzerland on official business." She turned to Captain Morrison. "Captain, as head of security, you have the authority to make decisions about the handling of royal regalia in emergency situations, don't you?" Morrison nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Majesty, but this would be highly irregular. These are highly irregular circumstances." The Queen's voice carried a note of command that brooked no argument. Dr. Hartley, do you have a magnifying glass with you? I have a jeweler's loupe, Your Majesty. It's standard equipment for historical research. Then let's settle this matter. Once and for all, Lady Margaret carefully placed the imperial state crown on a velvet-covered table near the window where the natural light was strongest. Dr. Hartley produced a small but powerful magnifying device from her portfolio, then hesitated. Your Majesty, I should warn you. If we find evidence that this crown is indeed a replica, it will create an unprecedented constitutional crisis. The legitimacy of every ceremony conducted with these crown jewels over the past 70 years could be called into question. Queen Camilla's expression was resolute. Dr. Hartley, the foundation of the monarchy is truth and tradition. If our traditions are built upon a lie, then we must confront that lie regardless of the consequences. Dr. Hartley nodded and carefully lifted the crown, turning it to examine the interior. She adjusted the loupe and peered intently at the inside band of the crown. For several long moments the room was silent except for the sounds of her careful examination. Finally, she straightened up, her face grave. Your Majesty, there is indeed an inscription here. It reads TH 1941, followed by what appears to be a serial number. The confirmation hit the room like a physical blow. Captain Morrison felt his knees weaken. Queen Camilla sank into her chair, her hands pressed to her temples. This changes everything, the Queen said quietly. If this crown is a replica, if the real imperial state crown has been hidden for over 70 years, then every state opening, every coronation ceremony, every official function where these jewels were displayed, has been conducted with replicas, Dr. Hartley finished. Your Majesty, I'm so sorry to be the bearer of this news. Lady Margaret had gone completely pale. But what about the other crown jewels? How many of them might be replicas? According to the documents, at least 6 major pieces were replaced with copies. The imperial state crown, St. Edward's crown, the crown of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and several scepters and orbs. Captain Morrison's radio crackled to life, making everyone in the room jump. Captain Morrison, this is Control. We need your final security clearance for the motorcade departure in 30 minutes. Morrison looked at Queen Camilla, who nodded grimly. He keyed his radio. Control, this is Captain Morrison. We need to delay departure. There's been a security concern. Sir, what kind of concern? Morrison looked around the room at the faces staring at him. I can't discuss it over the radio. I need you to contact Colonel Hartwell immediately and have him report to the Queen's chambers. Understood, sir. As Morrison clipped his radio back to his belt, Queen Camilla stood up with renewed determination. Captain, I want you to contact Coots Bank immediately. I want that safety deposit box opened within the hour. Your Majesty, the bank will never... They will if I personally guarantee the request. Dr. Hartley, I want you to prepare a complete report on everything you've discovered. Lady Margaret, please inform the private secretary that there will be a delay in our departure. But do not, and I cannot stress this enough, do not tell anyone the reason why. What will you tell Parliament, Your Majesty? Lady Margaret asked. They'll need some explanation for the delay. Queen Camilla walked to the window again, looking out at the crowds of people waiting to see their monarch. The weight of the decision she was about to make seemed to settle around her like a heavy cloak. I don't know yet, she said finally, but I do know that I cannot wear a replica crown to the state opening of Parliament. If my grandfather-in-law took such care to preserve the real crown jewels during Britain's darkest hour, then I owe it to him, to the institution of monarchy, and to the British people to ensure that the truth is finally revealed. Captain Morrison felt the full weight of his family's legacy pressing down upon him. Somewhere out there, possibly in a safety deposit box that had remained unopened for 5 years, lay the key to one of the greatest secrets in British royal history, and in just over an hour, he would have to face whatever truth his grandfather had been carrying for more than 70 years. 30 minutes later, Captain Morrison stood outside the imposing glass doors of Coots Bank on the Strand, accompanied by Dr. Hartley and 2 armed palace guards. The Queen had moved swiftly once her decision was made, personally telephoning the bank's chairman to arrange the emergency opening of the safety deposit box. Inside the bank's private vault, Morrison's hands trembled as he inserted the inherited key into box number 2847. He had carried this key on his keychain for 5 years, never imagining it might unlock one of the greatest secrets in British history. Are you ready, Captain? Dr. Hartley asked gently. She could see the emotional weight this discovery was placing on him. Morrison nodded and turned the key. The box opened with a soft click that seemed to echo through the small windowless room. Inside, he found a leather-bound journal, several official-looking documents, and a small wrapped package. With shaking hands, he lifted out the journal and opened it to the first page. In his grandfather's distinctive handwriting, he read, "For my grandson James, should the time come when the truth must be revealed. What follows is the most important secret I have ever been asked to keep." Dr. Hartley moved closer as Morrison continued reading aloud. The journal detailed Colonel Morrison's meetings with King George VI in the autumn of 1940. As German bombs fell on London and invasion seemed imminent, September 15, 1940, Morrison read, "His Majesty summoned me to a private audience today. What he revealed to me must never be spoken of while he lives, and perhaps not even after. The crown jewels we moved from the tower last month were not the originals. Those were moved 3 weeks earlier to a location known only to His Majesty and myself." Morrison paused, his voice catching. "The replicas are so perfect that they fool even the palace staff. His Majesty believes this deception is necessary to protect the true symbols of the monarchy from destruction or theft by the enemy. But he fears what will happen if he dies before the war ends and the secret dies with him." The journal entries continued chronologically, detailing a complex operation that had taken months to plan and execute. Colonel Morrison had worked with a select group of trusted soldiers to move the real crown jewels to a location that King George VI had chosen personally. October 3, 1940. Morrison continued reading. "Today we completed the final transfer. The real imperial state crown, St. Edward's crown, and 4 other pieces of the regalia are now secure in their new location. His Majesty has given me a map and detailed instructions, sealed and marked for my eyes only. I pray I never need to use them." Dr. Hartley pointed to one of the documents in the box. "Captain, that looks like it might be the sealed instructions." Morrison carefully lifted a thick envelope that bore the royal seal and his grandfather's name written in the king's own hand. The wax seal had never been broken. With Dr. Hartley watching intently, he carefully broke the seal and unfolded the papers inside. The first document was indeed a map, hand-drawn by King George VI himself. It showed the grounds of Windsor Castle, but with markings and annotations that Morrison had never seen before. An X marked a location in what appeared to be the castle's lower ward, near the Round Tower. The second document was a letter addressed to Colonel Morrison and his heirs. Morrison read it aloud. "My dear Colonel Morrison, if these instructions are being read, it means that circumstances have arisen which require the return of the true crown jewels to their rightful place. The location marked on the accompanying map leads to a chamber beneath Windsor Castle that has been known only to sovereigns for over 300 years. The entrance is concealed behind what appears to be a decorative stone panel in the wall of the Round Tower's foundation." Morrison looked up at Dr. Hartley. "This is incredible. He's describing a secret chamber that's been hidden for centuries." "Keep reading," she urged. "The chamber can be accessed using the key that accompanies this letter. Inside you will find not only the crown jewels that were hidden during the present crisis, but also other treasures and documents that have been kept secret by the crown for generations. I entrust this knowledge to you and your descendants with the understanding that it should only be revealed when the security of the realm and the integrity of the monarchy require it." Morrison reached into the box again and found the small wrapped package. Inside was an ornate brass key unlike any he had ever seen. Its head was decorated with the royal coat of arms, and it felt surprisingly heavy in his palm. Dr. Hartley stared at the key in amazement. "Captain, do you understand what this means? There's a secret chamber beneath Windsor Castle that hasn't been opened since 1940. The real crown jewels have been sitting there for over 80 years." Morrison carefully gathered all the documents and placed them back in the safety deposit box. But he kept the key. "Dr. Hartley, we need to return to the palace immediately. The Queen needs to see this." As they left the bank, Morrison's radio crackled again. "Captain Morrison, this is Colonel Hartwell. Her Majesty has requested your immediate return. The delay has created significant complications." "Understood, sir. We're en route." During the car ride back to Buckingham Palace, Dr. Hartley studied the map more closely. "Captain, look at this notation here. It says the chamber was last opened in 1936, during the abdication crisis. King George VI must have used it to secure important documents during that turbulent time. What kind of documents? I can only guess, but think about it. A secret chamber known only to monarchs used during times of crisis. It could contain anything. Letters, treaties, evidence of historical events that never made it into the official records. Morrison felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had discovered. Dr. Hartley, even if we can access this chamber and retrieve the real crown jewels, how do we explain this to the public? How do we tell people that every major royal ceremony for the past 70 years has been conducted with replica crowns? That's a question for Her Majesty to answer, Dr. Hartley replied. But I think the more important question is, what else might we find in that chamber? Back at Buckingham Palace, they found Queen Camilla in an emergency meeting with her private secretary, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and several senior government officials. The delay in the state opening had already created a media frenzy, with speculation running wild about everything from security threats to family health crises. Your Majesty, Captain Morrison announced as they entered the room, we found the proof you were looking for. The Queen immediately dismissed the other officials, asking only Colonel Hartwell to remain. Morrison spread the documents from the safety deposit box across the Queen's desk, explaining what they had discovered. When he finished, Queen Camilla picked up the brass key and examined it closely. This changes everything, she said quietly. Colonel Hartwell, I want you to arrange immediate transport to Windsor Castle. We're going to open that chamber today. Your Majesty, the colonel replied carefully. The media attention surrounding today's delay is already intense. If we suddenly make an unscheduled trip to Windsor, then we'll tell them I'm feeling unwell and need to rest before rescheduling the state opening, the Queen interrupted. Colonel, this secret has been kept for over 80 years. It ends today. Dr. Hartley leaned forward. Your Majesty, if I may suggest, we should also bring along an expert from the Tower of London, someone who knows the authentic crown jewels better than anyone else. If we're going to retrieve the originals, we'll need to verify their authenticity immediately. Agreed, Colonel. Contact the keeper of the crown jewels. Tell him it's a matter of national security. As the emergency plans took shape around him, Captain Morrison found himself thinking about his grandfather. Colonel Sir William Morrison had carried this secret for over 70 years, taking it to his grave rather than risk compromising what his king had entrusted to him. Now it fell to his grandson to see that the truth was finally revealed. But as Morrison looked at the mysterious key in the Queen's hands, he couldn't shake the feeling that the crown jewels might be the least shocking thing they would find in the secret chamber beneath Windsor Castle. King George II's letter had mentioned other treasures and documents kept secret by the crown for generations. What other secrets had been hidden away during times of crisis, and was the world ready to learn the truth about them? The Queen stood up, her decision made. We leave for Windsor in 1 hour. Whatever we find in that chamber, whatever secrets have been kept, it's time for them to see the light of day. The convoy of black vehicles swept through the gates of Windsor Castle, just as the afternoon sun began to cast long shadows across the ancient stone walls. Queen Camilla sat in the back seat of the lead car, the mysterious brass key clutched in her hands, while Captain Morrison rode alongside her, his grandfather's journal open on his lap. Dr. Hartley followed in the second vehicle with Colonel Hartwell and Dr. Marcus Whitfield, the keeper of the crown jewels who had been hastily summoned from the Tower of London. Dr. Whitfield, a thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses, had been told only that there was an urgent matter concerning the authenticity of certain pieces in the royal collection. As they approached the Round Tower, the oldest part of Windsor Castle, Morrison studied his grandfather's map once more. The location marked with an X was at the base of the tower's north wall, behind what King George VI had described as a decorative stone panel. Your Majesty, Morrison said as their car came to a stop. According to my grandfather's notes, the entrance is concealed behind a stone panel that looks like part of the tower's original decoration. But the panel should move when pressure is applied to a specific point. The group gathered at the base of the round tower, where centuries-old stones rose majestically toward the sky. Dr. Hartley consulted the hand-drawn map, while Morrison examined the wall closely, running his fingers along the weathered stones. Here, he said suddenly, stopping at what appeared to be an unremarkable section of wall, decorated with carved roses and thistles. This matches the drawing exactly. He pressed against a stone rose in the center of the panel, just as his grandfather's notes had instructed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a grinding sound that spoke of mechanisms unused for decades, the entire panel shifted inward by several inches, revealing that it was actually a cleverly concealed door. Extraordinary, Dr. Whitfield breathed, adjusting his glasses. I've studied Windsor Castle for 30 years, and I never knew this existed. Queen Camilla stepped forward, her expression a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Colonel Hartwell, do we have torches? Yes, Your Majesty. We came prepared. Morrison inserted the brass key into a hidden lock that had been revealed when the panel opened. The key turned smoothly, despite having been unused for over 80 years. With a deep breath, he pushed the stone door open wider, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The group descended carefully, their flashlight beams dancing across stone walls that seemed to absorb the light. The air was stale but surprisingly dry, and Morrison could hear the sound of their footsteps echoing in what seemed to be a much larger space ahead. At the bottom of the stairs, they emerged into a vaulted chamber that took their breath away. The room was larger than Morrison had expected, with stone arches supporting the ceiling and alcoves carved into the walls. But it was the contents of the chamber that made them all stop in amazement. Glass display cases lined the walls, each one containing artifacts that seemed to span centuries of British history. But it was the central display case that drew their immediate attention. Inside, illuminated by their flashlights, sat the unmistakable silhouette of the imperial state crown. My God, Dr. Whitfield whispered, moving closer to the case. It's magnificent. He produced a specialized magnifying device from his toolkit and began examining the crown through the glass. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. The way the light plays off the Black Prince's ruby. The symmetry of the diamond arrangement. This is definitely not the crown we have at the tower. Queen Camilla approached the case slowly, as if seeing the crown jewels for the first time. Dr. Whitfield, can you be certain this is authentic? Your Majesty, I've spent decades studying every facet, every setting, every scratch and imperfection on the crown jewels. What we have at the tower is a remarkable replica, but this... He gestured toward the crown in the case. This is the real imperial state crown. I can see details here that simply aren't present in the version we've been displaying. Dr. Hartley moved toward another display case. Your Majesty, look at this. It's St. Edward's crown, and there are documents here too. She pointed her flashlight at a collection of sealed envelopes and leather-bound volumes arranged in one of the wall alcoves. Morrison explored further into the chamber, his flashlight revealing more display cases and storage areas. There's much more here than just the crown jewels, he called out. I see weapons, artwork, what looks like ancient manuscripts. Queen Camilla joined him, her flashlight beam revealing a collection of swords and ceremonial weapons that seemed to date back centuries. These must be artifacts that various monarchs considered too precious or too sensitive to display publicly. Colonel Hartwell had been examining a large document case near the back of the chamber. Your Majesty, this case is labeled Abdication Crisis, 1936. There are dozens of sealed documents inside. The revelation sent a chill through the group. The abdication of King Edward VIII had been one of the most dramatic events in modern royal history, but the official records had always seemed incomplete. Now it appeared that the full truth had been hidden away in this secret chamber. Dr. Hartley moved to another section of the chamber. There are cases here labeled with dates going back to the English Civil War, personal effects of Charles Dar's 1649, documents relating to the Jacobite succession, 1715. This isn't just a hiding place for the crown jewels. It's a repository for the most sensitive materials in royal history. Morrison found himself drawn to a case labeled George VI. Personal instructions. Inside, he could see more journals and documents, including what appeared to be detailed plans for the wartime concealment operation that his grandfather had participated in. Your Majesty, Dr. Whitfield called from the central display case. I need to examine these crown jewels more closely. If we're going to return them to official use, I'll need to document their condition and verify every detail. Queen Camilla nodded, but her attention was focused on the document cases surrounding them. Dr. Hartley, what we've found here goes far beyond the crown jewels. These documents could rewrite entire chapters of British history. Yes, Your Majesty. The question is, what do we do with them? Some of these secrets have been kept for centuries. Opening them could have consequences we can't predict. Morrison's radio crackled, startling everyone in the silent chamber. Captain Morrison, this is Control. We've received multiple inquiries from the media about Her Majesty's whereabouts. How should we respond? Morrison looked at Queen Camilla, who nodded. Control. Inform them that Her Majesty is resting at Windsor Castle and will make a statement regarding the rescheduling of the state opening later this evening. Understood. Sir? As Morrison clipped his radio back to his belt, Queen Camilla made a decision that would change everything. Colonel Hartwell, I want every item in this chamber photographed and catalogued. Dr. Whitfield, begin the process of authenticating the crown jewels. Dr. Hartley, start examining the historical documents, but carefully. Some of these seals may never have been broken. Your Majesty, Colonel Hartwell said carefully, are you certain you want to open documents that previous monarchs chose to keep sealed? Queen Camilla walked to the center of the chamber, surrounded by centuries of hidden royal history. Colonel, my great-grandfather-in-law preserved these items and documents because he believed future generations might need them. The crown jewels were hidden to protect the monarchy during its darkest hour. These other items were preserved for reasons we don't yet understand. She picked up one of the sealed envelopes from the George VI collection, but I believe the time has come to understand those reasons. Whatever secrets this chamber holds, whatever truths have been hidden, they need to see the light of day. The British people deserve to know the full history of their monarchy, not just the parts that previous generations deemed safe to reveal. Dr. Hartley approached with another document case, this one labeled Victoria Final Testament 1901. Your Majesty, Queen Victoria's Final Testament? I thought all her papers were in the Royal Archives. Apparently not all of them, Queen Camilla replied. Dr. Hartley, I want you to begin with that case. Queen Victoria's reign was the foundation of the modern monarchy. If she left instructions or revelations that were considered too sensitive for public knowledge, we need to understand what they were. As the team began their work in the hidden chamber, none of them could have predicted that Queen Victoria's sealed testament would contain information that would not only explain why the secret chamber had been created in the first place, but would also reveal a truth about the royal succession that would shake the very foundations of the British constitutional monarchy. The real crown jewels were just the beginning. The most shocking secrets were yet to be discovered. Dr. Hartley's hands trembled as she carefully broke the wax seal on Queen Victoria's Final Testament. The document was dated December 1901, just weeks before the Queen Empress's death, and bore her personal seal pressed deep into red wax that had remained unbroken for over a century. Your Majesty, Dr. Hartley said, her voice barely above a whisper, this document is addressed to future sovereigns of the House of Windsor, to be opened only in times of constitutional crisis. Queen Camilla moved closer as Dr. Hartley unfolded the thick parchment. The late Queen Victoria's distinctive handwriting filled multiple pages, written in the formal style of the Victorian era, but with an urgency that was unmistakable even after all these years. Read it aloud, Queen Camilla instructed. Dr. Hartley began, to my successors who may find need to access this secret chamber. I leave this testament as a warning and a guide. The truth contained herein have been known only to myself and will, I pray, remain sealed unless the very survival of our monarchy depends upon their revelation. Captain Morrison and Dr. Whitfield stopped their work with the crown jewels to listen. Colonel Hartwell positioned himself near the chamber entrance, though his attention was clearly focused on the document being read. I write this in the final year of my reign, having carried these secrets for over 6 decades. What follows concerns the true circumstances of my accession to the throne, circumstances that were concealed from Parliament and the people for reasons that I believed, at the time, were in the best interests of the realm. Queen Camilla felt a chill run through her. Continue. In June 1837, upon the death of my uncle King William IV, I was proclaimed queen at the age of 18. However, what was not revealed to anyone outside a small circle of trusted advisors was that King William had, in his final weeks, expressed doubts about my legitimacy as his heir. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Dr. Hartley looked up from the document, her face pale. Your Majesty, are you certain you want me to continue? Read it all. King William had received information suggesting that my father, the Duke of Kent, may not have been legally married to my mother, the Duchess of Kent, at the time of my birth. The evidence suggested that the Duke had contracted a secret marriage with another woman, several years before his marriage to my mother, a marriage that had never been formally dissolved. Morrison felt his legs weaken. The implications of what they were hearing were staggering. If Queen Victoria's legitimacy had been in question, it would have affected not just her reign, but the entire line of succession that followed. Dr. Hartley's voice grew steadier as she continued reading the explosive document. King William's advisors counseled him that this information, if revealed, would plunge the nation into constitutional chaos. The Reform Act had only recently passed, the country was still recovering from the Napoleonic Wars, and political stability was fragile. They convinced him that the rumored evidence was likely false and that even if it were true, the damage to the monarchy would be catastrophic. But Victoria clearly had doubts. Queen Camilla observed, "Yes," she writes, "I have spent my entire reign haunted by the possibility that I am not the rightful Queen of England. I have searched extensively for proof of my father's alleged earlier marriage, but have found only fragments of evidence that raise more questions than they answer. However, I believe it is my duty to preserve this information for future generations should they ever need to confront these questions." Dr. Hartley turned to the next page. "The evidence I have gathered is contained within this chamber. Letters, witness statements, and church records that suggest my father may have been secretly married to Lady Catherine Woodville in 1790, 7 years before his marriage to my mother. If this marriage was valid and never dissolved, then I am illegitimate and my children have no rightful claim to the throne." The silence in the chamber was deafening. Colonel Hartwell was the first to speak. "Your Majesty, if this is true, Queen Camilla finished, then the entire Windsor line, including myself, may have no legal right to the British throne." Dr. Whitfield had gone completely pale. "Your Majesty, surely this is speculation from a worried elderly woman. Queen Victoria reigned for 64 years. Her legitimacy was never seriously questioned. But she questioned it herself," Morrison pointed out, "and she preserved evidence that she felt future monarchs might need to examine." Dr. Hartley found another document case labeled, "Duke of Kent, Private Correspondence, the 1790-1797. Your Majesty, this appears to contain the evidence Queen Victoria mentioned." Queen Camilla stared at the case for a long moment. Opening it would mean confronting a truth that could destroy the monarchy as they knew it. But not opening it would mean continuing to live with questions that had haunted Queen Victoria for her entire reign. "Open it," she said finally. Inside the case, they found a collection of letters, church records, and witness statements dating from the 1790s. The documents painted a picture of a secret ceremony performed in a small parish church in Scotland, where the Duke of Kent appeared to have married Lady Catherine Woodville in the presence of 2 witnesses. "Here's a letter from the Duke to Lady Catherine," Dr. Hartley said, reading from a faded piece of paper. "My dearest wife, though our marriage must remain secret for political reasons, know that you are and always shall be the only woman I have loved." Morrison found a church record that seemed to confirm the ceremony. This is dated September 15, 1790. It records the marriage of Edward Augustus, Duke of Kent, to Catherine Mary Woodville, witnessed by Lord James Fitzroy and the Reverend William MacLeod. "But there's more," Dr. Hartley said, examining another document. "Here's a letter from Lady Catherine to her sister, dated 1797. She writes, Edward has informed me that for reasons of state, he must enter into another marriage arrangement. He assures me that our union remains valid in the eyes of God, but he asks that I release him from his public obligations to me." Queen Camilla sat down heavily on a stone bench that had been carved into the wall. "So Lady Catherine knew about the Duke's marriage to Victoria's mother?" "It appears so. But Your Majesty, look at this." Dr. Hartley held up another document. "This is a legal opinion from 1801, written by the Lord Chancellor at the time. He concluded that the Scottish marriage, while possibly valid, would not be recognized by English law because it had not been approved by King George III as required by the Royal Marriages Act." Colonel Hartwell stepped forward. "Your Majesty, if the legal opinion concluded that the first marriage was not valid under English law, then Queen Victoria's legitimacy would not have been in question. But she didn't know about this legal opinion," Morrison realized. "She only had the evidence of the marriage ceremony itself. She lived her entire life thinking she might be illegitimate when the legal question had already been resolved." Dr. Hartley continued examining the documents. There's something else here. A letter from Queen Victoria to her private secretary, written in 1887 during her Golden Jubilee. She writes, "I have decided that these documents must remain sealed. Even if my fears about my legitimacy are unfounded, the mere suggestion that they exist could be used by those who wish to damage the monarchy. Future generations must decide whether the truth is worth the risk." Queen Camilla stood up, her decision clear. She was right to preserve these documents, and she was right to leave the decision to us. But now that we know the full truth, including the legal opinion that would have resolved her doubts, we can make an informed choice. "What choice is that, Your Majesty?" Dr. Whitfield asked. "We have two options. We can reseal these documents and pretend we never found them, allowing Queen Victoria's fears to remain buried forever. Or we can reveal the truth, both the evidence that worried her and the legal ruling that would have put her mind at ease." Morrison looked around the chamber at the centuries of hidden royal history. "Your Majesty, there's still one more question. If we reveal the existence of this chamber and its contents, what about all the other secrets stored here? The abdication documents, the Civil War artifacts, the other sealed cases we haven't even examined yet?" Queen Camilla followed his gaze to the dozens of unopened document cases that lined the chamber walls. Each one represented secrets that previous monarchs had deemed too dangerous or too sensitive to reveal. But together they represented a complete and honest history of the British monarchy, one that the public had never been allowed to see. "Captain Morrison," she said finally, "I believe your grandfather and King George VI preserved all of this for a reason. They knew that someday, someone would need to make the decision about whether the monarchy should continue to be built on carefully maintained secrets, or whether it should finally be built on complete truth." She walked to the center of the chamber and looked up at the ancient stone arches that had protected these secrets for so long. "I choose truth, all of it. The British people deserve to know the real history of their royal family, not just the sanitized version we've been presenting for centuries." But as Queen Camilla made this momentous decision, none of them noticed that Colonel Hartwell had been quietly speaking into a small communication device. And none of them realized that the discovery of the secret chamber had already been reported to individuals who had their own reasons for wanting these particular secrets to remain buried forever. 3 hours later, as the team worked to carefully document and photograph the contents of the secret chamber, Captain Morrison's radio crackled with an urgent message that would change everything. "Captain Morrison, this is emergency control. We have multiple unmarked vehicles approaching Windsor Castle. Palace security has been compromised. You need to evacuate Her Majesty immediately." Morrison grabbed his radio, his training kicking in instantly. "Control, what's the nature of the threat?" "Unknown, sir. But we've lost contact with our perimeter teams. I repeat, you need to evacuate now." Queen Camilla looked up from the documents she had been examining. "Captain, what's happening?" "Your Majesty, we need to leave this chamber immediately. There appears to be a security situation developing above ground." But even as Morrison spoke, they heard the grinding sound of the stone door closing above them. The sound echoed down the narrow staircase, followed by what sounded like heavy objects being moved into place. Dr. Hartley ran to the bottom of the stairs and shone her flashlight upward. "The entrance has been sealed from the outside. We're trapped." Colonel Hartwell stepped out of the shadows, and for the first time since they had entered the chamber, Morrison noticed that the colonel was holding a pistol pointed directly at Queen Camilla. "I'm afraid that was necessary, Your Majesty," Colonel Hartwell said calmly. "You've discovered information that certain people have worked very hard to keep secret for over a century." Queen Camilla faced him with remarkable composure. "Colonel, what is the meaning of this? Your Majesty, there are families in this country whose wealth and power have been built on maintaining the current royal succession. Families who have invested fortunes in ensuring that the Windsor line remains unquestioned. What you've discovered here tonight threatens to destroy not just the monarchy, but the entire power structure that surrounds it." Morrison's hand moved slowly toward his own weapon, but Hartwell noticed the movement immediately. "I wouldn't, Captain. There are armed men positioned throughout Windsor Castle. Your Queen's safety depends entirely on your cooperation." Dr. Hartley found her voice. "Colonel, you're talking about treason, about holding the monarch captive." "I'm talking about preservation, Dr. Hartley, the preservation of an institution that has served Britain for over 1,000 years. Do you really think the country would be better served by chaos? By constitutional crisis? By the dissolution of everything that makes Britain Britain? Queen Camilla stepped forward, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Colonel, who are you working for? I work for the same people my father worked for and his father before him. Families that have been the true power behind the throne for generations. The Percys, the Howards, the Fitzroys, descendants of nobility who have maintained their influence by ensuring that royal succession remains predictable and stable. Morrison realized the full scope of what they were facing. This isn't just about Queen Victoria's legitimacy, is it? You've been manipulating royal history for centuries. Colonel Hartwell smiled coldly. Captain, your grandfather was a good soldier, but he was naive. He thought King George VI was acting alone when he hid the crown jewels. He never knew that the entire operation was orchestrated by families who needed time to ensure that certain inconvenient documents disappeared forever. But the documents are still here, Dr. Whitfield pointed out. Some of them are, but others were removed decades ago. The really dangerous ones, the ones that would have revealed just how many times the succession has been guided in the direction that best served the realm. Queen Camilla's eyes blazed with anger. You're telling me that my entire reign, my family's entire legacy has been subject to manipulation by shadowy families operating behind the scenes? Your Majesty, every royal family in Europe has operated this way for centuries. The public believes in the divine right of kings, but the reality is that succession has always been managed by those with the wisdom and resources to ensure stability. Dr. Hartley had been quietly examining the chamber walls while this conversation unfolded. Now she spoke up, her voice carrying a note of discovery. Colonel, I think you've made a mistake. What do you mean? You said certain dangerous documents were removed decades ago. But look around this chamber. There are document cases here that weren't mentioned in King George VI's inventory, cases that appear to have been added much more recently. Morrison followed her gaze and saw what she meant. In one corner of the chamber sat several modern-looking metal filing cabinets that seemed completely out of place among the ancient stone and medieval artifacts. Queen Camilla noticed them too. Colonel, what's in those filing cabinets? Colonel Hartwell's composed expression faltered for the first time. Your Majesty, those cabinets shouldn't be here. Dr. Hartley moved toward the nearest cabinet, ignoring the colonel's weapon. These locks are electronic, not mechanical. And look at the labels. They're dated from the 1990s and 2000s. She tried one of the cabinet doors and found it unlocked. Inside were dozens of files containing modern documents, photographs, and what appeared to be surveillance records. Colonel, Queen Camilla said, her voice carrying the full weight of royal authority, I order you to explain what these documents are. Hartwell's hand holding the pistol began to shake. Your Majesty, those files, they weren't supposed to be accessible. They contain operational records that should have been destroyed years ago. Morrison had been slowly positioning himself for a potential move against the colonel, but now he was distracted by what Dr. Hartley was pulling from the filing cabinet. Your Majesty, these appear to be surveillance records on members of the royal family dating back 30 years. Photos, phone transcripts, financial records. Dr. Hartley opened another file, and here are records of what they call succession management operations. Princess Diana's death, the Duke of Windsor's abdication, even. My God, even King George VI's supposedly natural death in 1952. The revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow. Colonel Hartwell's carefully maintained composure completely crumbled. Those files were never supposed to be stored here. Someone has been using this chamber without authorization. Queen Camilla's voice was ice cold. Colonel, are you telling me that Princess Diana was murdered? Your Majesty, the operations described in those files, they weren't my responsibility. I'm just palace security. I follow orders. Morrison seized the moment of confusion to disarm the colonel, moving with the speed and precision of his military training. Within seconds, Hartwell was on the ground and Morrison had control of the weapon. But even as Morrison secured the colonel, Dr. Hartley made another discovery that would prove even more shocking. In the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, she found a folder labeled Project Succession, Active Operations 2025. Inside were detailed plans for what was described as the managed transition of the monarchy, following Queen Camilla's eventual death or abdication. The plans included financial arrangements, media manipulation strategies, and even contingency plans for accelerating the timeline if necessary. Queen Camilla read the documents with growing horror. These plans, they're discussing my death as if it's a scheduled event. Dr. Hartley found the most chilling document of all, a medical report dated just 2 weeks earlier, detailing Queen Camilla's recent health checkup and noting suitable conditions for implementation of Protocol 7. Morrison looked at the document over her shoulder. "Your Majesty, what is Protocol 7? But before Queen Camilla could answer, they heard sounds from above, the grinding of stone and the voices of men working to unseal the chamber entrance. Morrison raised the pistol, prepared to defend his queen against whatever forces were coming down those stairs. "Your Majesty," he said grimly, "I think we're about to find out exactly how far these people are willing to go to keep their secrets." As the stone door above began to open and armed figures started descending the stairs, Queen Camilla made a decision that would either save the monarchy or destroy it forever. She grabbed the most damning documents from the filing cabinet and turned to address the group. "Whatever happens next," she said, "these documents must reach the public. The British people have a right to know that their royal family has been manipulated and controlled by shadow networks for generations. Captain Morrison, Dr. Hartley, Dr. Whitfield, I charge you with ensuring that the truth survives, even if we don't." But as the armed figures reached the bottom of the stairs, their faces hidden behind tactical masks, Queen Camilla realized that the greatest secret of all was still to be revealed. The leader of the group removed his mask, revealing a face that she recognized and trusted. The conspiracy went deeper than any of them had imagined, and the battle for the truth was just beginning.